Thank you very much. Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation to the conference Humanities and the Rise of AI. The general topic of my lecture is AI art. So I will start with an overview of the state of the AI art, but the guiding question of my talk is how creative is the AI art that is beginning to emerge today? Ahmed El-Gamal, along with his team at Rutgers University, has developed an autonomous AI artist. It's the first time an artificial intelligence has created art without human intervention. Quote El-Gamal. The program is called ICANN and is based on a 2014 invention by Ian Goodfellow called Generative Adversarial Network, or GAN for short. When you train such GANs for portraits, you get this kind of blurry faces, though the use of GANs produces a specific Francis Bacon-like AI style, also called GANism. El-Gamal's goal was to transform GANs into CANs, that is, to transform a generative adversarial network into a creative adversarial network by formulating an additional criterion. ICANN, or AI can, is just the name for a special can, or rather, ICANN is a can with a pun. ICANN is structured in such a way that, on the one hand, it uses over 100,000 images from all styles and genres of the last 500 years of Western art to learn what distinguishes a painting that is art from a mere image that is not art. But on the other hand, ICANN is trained to ensure that the newly generated image does not resemble any known art style. In the end, the program managed to create these remarkable abstract images. As a purely scientific research project, ICANN could have ended here, without any major impact on the art world. But the team took some additional steps. First, they developed a visual Turing test that compared the images generated by ICANN with images from Art Basel 2016. The astonishing result was that the test subjects could no longer distinguish whether an image had been created by a human or a machine. In addition, the paintings were shown in exhibitions and sold for high five-figure sums. And finally, Ahmed El-Gamal and art historian Marian Mazzone published the essay Art, Creativity and the Potential of Artificial Intelligence. This essay can certainly be read as a challenge to art philosophy, as it attempts to reformulate fundamental aesthetic terms. The authors make three thought-provoking statements with respect to ICANN. AI art is art, AI art is conceptual art, and AI art is creative. Before I will discuss these far-reaching theses, I would like to present a few other examples of AI art. Here you can see the interactive installation of Memo-Actin Learning to See from 2017. In the foreground, the exhibition visitor can move objects such as a rack and a charging cable on a table. A camera records these hand movements, which can be seen directly on the left screen. The same information is simultaneously sent to an artificial neural network that has been trained on ocean images, fire images, clouds, and flower images. Accordingly, the network interprets the hand movements with the rack and the cable as water, fire, clouds, and flowers, what can be seen on the right screen. I consider learning to see a key work of AI art because it reflects its basic principles in a very poetic way. The deep learning systems that have made today's emerging AI possible learn to see the world from the data and images with which they have been trained. Helena Zarin took some photos in the department store Bed Bath & Beyond and trained again with them. She then selected some of these images and arranged them into a grid, creating an aesthetically very attractive and interesting visual work. What I especially like about this work are the ironic titles. Everyday household items from the department store Bed Bath & Beyond became abstract art that is something way beyond ordinary life. And the whole series is called Latent Shelfie, in an allusion to the selfie. Chris Peters trained GANs with landscape paintings of tonalism, a romanticizing style of painting that had developed in America between 1880 and 1915. He then selected some of these AI images and painted them himself with oil paint on canvas. In the logic of the art system, it would be considered kitsch if Peters were still painting in the style of tonalism today. For that, you need at least a good artistic reason, that is, a strong concept, such as using AI as an image generator. This is Mario Klingmann's installation Memories of Passerby 1 from 2018. The GANs were each trained with portraits of men and women from the 17th to the 19th centuries. Visitors were encouraged for a moment to take a seat in this chair. The wooden box under the screens constantly creates new, unique portraits in Ganism style. So this is here a time-lapse mode, and in real time, of course, the faces change much slower. While Memo Acton's work demonstrates the basic principle of AI art, the algorithm sees what it has learned. Klingmann's work makes visible the telos of all AI art, namely the infinite stream of artificially generated images. The work shows, in Hegel's words, a bad infinity unleashed by AI in the arts. In this respect, I consider Memories of Passerby 1 to be as much a key work of AI art as Learning to See by Memo Acton. If we look at the previous examples, it becomes clear that it is not the AI image on their own that are considered AI art, but that these AI images are first valorized into art. So far, we have been able to observe at least 4 such strategies of art valorization: the Turing test, the use of irony, manual craft, and the media-specific self-reflection. My last example of AI art is almost completely absorbed in such valorization strategies. It is also the example with the biggest media echo that AI art has triggered so far. This AI painting, created by the French 3-person artist collective Obvious, was sold by Christie's auction house for nearly $500,000. However, this great success on the art market was met with some reluctance in the AI art community. The criticism was that the artist collective had only used a freely available GAN from another AI artist without programming and training it themselves. It was also said that the aesthetic quality of the AI image was rather poor. Indeed, the Paris-based artist collective was less interested in technical and aesthetic issues than in artistic strategies. This already starts with the title, Edmond de Bellamy. Bellamy means the lovely friend in French and is an allusion to the name Goodfellow, the inventor of the GANs. Another valorization is the signature. which consists of a mathematical formula underlying the AI algorithm used to produce the image. In addition, the printing of the image is valorized by the gilt frame as a classical painting. The work Edmond de Bellamy is also part of a fictional family tree and is contextualized in this way in a story. The claim below that the Bellamy family tree represents the art history of several centuries from the point of view of AI is, of course, a ludicrous hoax. Another valorization is this artistic manifesto in the spirit of the historical avant-garde. A press release with this provocative slogan, "Creativity is not just for humans," is also part of this kind of art valorization with theoretical statements. And last but not least, the artist collective created this abstract logo in reference to the Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. As in Renaissance items, a new unity of art and science is symbolized here in the light of AI. The artist collective has virtually overloaded the work Edmond de Bellamy with valorization strategies. This reveals an internal conflict in the AI art community. The pioneers of AI art are for the most part professional programmers or software engineers and are rarely educated at art schools or socialized in art scenes. However, the artists collective from Paris seems to be quite familiar with art history, art theory, and the mechanisms of the art market. The subtle irony of the story is that technologically advanced AI art has been hacked by old-fashioned analog art, to use the jargon of the digital natives. This brief overview of AI art in part 1 highlights a contradiction. On the one hand, there is a view that deep learning systems themselves are creative and produce art. On the other hand, AI artists also work with a variety of valorization strategies, so that one could think that only the creative human intervention transforms an AI image into works of art. In the following second part, I would like to outline very briefly a model of aesthetic modernity, on the basis of which this contradiction can be discussed and analyzed. The core idea of this model is that in the 20th century, an internal differentiation process took place in the art system, and that the major caesuras of modern art history can thus be reconstructed. This process consisted in a decoupling of three essential components of art communication: the work, the medium, and the concept. In the fine arts of the 19th century, these three components were tightly coupled. In the 21st century, there is art where these components are only loosely coupled to each other. The driving force behind this history of differentiation is the ability of the modern arts to negate all conventional notions of art. Until the 19th century, the medium of the fine arts intensified the expression and experience of beauty. At the beginning of the 20th century, the negation of the medium leads to the art of classical modernism with its isms. Here, specific concepts, such as the concept of cubism or expressionism, determine the way in which the aesthetic material is to be arranged in an artwork. In the next step, the negation of the artwork constitutes the art of the historical avant-garde, whose most radical manifestation is conceptual art. Here, art is reduced to the perceptual representation of a concept. Strictly speaking, conceptual art can be defined by an isomorphism principle. Conceptual art forms a one-to-one relationship between a concept and a simple perceptual image, that is, a percept. The erased de Kooning drawing from Robert Rauschenberg is exemplary for this isomorphism. The concept of the work is given by the title, namely to erase a drawing by de Kooning, and what one can perceive is exactly such an erased drawing. Postmodern art overcomes the avant-garde by negating a strong taboo of the avant-garde, namely to work in the classical medium of the fine arts with its preference for the aesthetic value of beauty, central perspective, and figurative representation. We are dealing here with a double negation, a negation of the medium of the visual arts. In postmodern art, for example, figurative painting returns, but this return is now mediated through the concepts of irony and quotation. Roy Lichtenstein quotes comics, for example. This kind of conceptual mediatedness is represented in the model with a gap between the two segments of medium and concept. And in the meantime, contemporary art has also emancipated itself from postmodern art with the help of a negation of the negation of the artwork. Thus, not only the use of the media, but also the artwork itself is conceptually mediated now. The three gaps between the three segments in the circle symbolize not only these new kind of conceptual mediatedness, but they also signify new degrees of freedom in the production and reception of art gained in the art system of the 20th century. Two aspects in particular are important for our further considerations of AI art. First, with this newly gained freedoms of contemporary art, the creativity space of art also expands. Second, with this model, we can comprehend a paradigm shift that took place in the 20th century. In classical modernism, newness was generated through the creation of new aesthetic material, which led to genuinely new aesthetic experiences for the recipient. Art is created here under the paradigm of material aesthetics. However, this idea of newness was exhausted very quickly. Sooner or later, in all art genres, people have noticed that it is not longer possible to create new isms and styles. But newness can also be generated by new aesthetic content, whereby I prefer to speak not of content but of Gehalt here. Gehalt is a non-translatable German term in the philosophical tradition of Hegel and Adorno. For our purposes, the following short definition of Gehalt will be sufficient. Gehalt is a content created through the interpretation of an artwork. Conceptual art thus appears as a turning point in modern arts. It marks a zero point in art history where a paradigm shift from material aesthetic to Gehalt aesthetic took place. This Gehalt aesthetic turn in the 20th century is essential for assessing the creativity space of AI art today. This was the model of aesthetic modernity in a nutshell. For those who have further interest in this topic, I have developed the model for music in the book, The Digital Revolution of Music and Music Philosophy, and for the visual arts in the book, Gehaltsästhetik and Art Philosophy. On my YouTube channel, you can also find lectures in German and English about the model and about conceptual art with its isomorphism principle. I come to the third and last part of my talk, where I will try to place AI art in this theoretical framework. What is crucial here is that this model also allows us to understand how the creativity space of the arts has expanded in the 20th century. Let's return to Ahmed Elgamal's visual Turing test. Above, you see images from Art Basel 2016. Below, you see icon images. Both sets of images were used in that Turing test. Amazingly, Art Basel and icon arrive at the same kind of universal abstract modernism. And the explanation for this is that they solve the same optimization problem. The question is, how can the attractiveness of images be optimized when all possibilities of radical aesthetic innovation have been exhausted and new styles and isms can no longer be invented? Under these conditions, the art market will avoid any recognizable style because for the buyers it looks old-fashioned and not new. And exactly this style avoidance is also encoded in icon. The mode of creativity that remains is the creativity of infinite variation. Apparently, icon identifies figurative painting itself as a style and in this respect tries to avoid any realism. At that point, uncompromising artists like Marcel Duchamp have abandoned the exhausted genre of painting and created conceptual art instead. Basically, the AI artists just presented have taken this path with their valorization strategies. Their work is not conceptual art in the strict sense of the isomorphism principle, but concept-based art. Such concept-based AI art has a much broader creativity space because it is essentially about a novel combination of AI images with concepts. However, I would guess that with the development of an artificial general intelligence, AGI for short, even such concept-based art will face competition from AI. Valorization strategies and art concepts in general can be found in thousands and thousands of works in art history. Art concepts are not always invented for the first time, but usually copied and modified. Once such repetition occurs, AGI systems will also be able to recognize these patterns and operate with them. Thus, I would expect AGI systems in the future to generate a variety of concepts that define the framework in which AI images are to be perceived and interpreted. What does it mean? Could the development of AGI eventually lead to the human artist being supplanted by an autonomous AI artist? Or is there such a thing as a human creativity space that is inaccessible to machines? To be able to discuss this question, we need to look back at the entire creativity space that has opened up for the arts in the 20th century. Let's take a closer look at a famous example. An example that can stand for an immanent differentiation of medium work and concept. My example is Maurizio Catalan's La Nonna Ora from 1999. The sculpture shows Pope John Paul II at the moment when he was hit by a meteorite and cries out as Jesus once did on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The title, The Ninth Hour, hints indirectly to this Bible quotation. Catalan's work is usually understood as blasphemy. In my opinion, the work also proves the existence of God. The probability is so extremely low by earthly standards that a meteorite would strike a pope that a divine intervention would actually be needed for this. The artwork thus simultaneously proves the existence and non-existence of God, which in turn can be seen as a symbol for the status of religion in liberal democracies. This once again raises the crucial question: is it conceivable that at some point in the future an artificial general intelligence could create such artwork? The work actually has only 5 elements: the Pope, the meteorite, the broken glass, the red carpet, and the Bible reference. So, what requirements would an AI have to fulfill to be able to assemble an artwork from 5 such building blocks? One reason why the development of an artificial general intelligence has failed so far is that computers have no common sense. Common sense is also required in the reception of this work, for example, to understand that this stone is a meteorite. The artwork does not directly provide you with this information. However, the broken glass on the red carpet activates the viewer's common sense and suggests a meteorite impact. The real problem of AI art, however, is not that such works presuppose common sense knowledge, but rather that they create uncommon sense. Artworks like this are the real singularity on Earth, as a compact synthesis of meaning. Such artwork is incomparable to anything that exists in reality. I suspect even an artificial general intelligence could learn nothing from thousands and thousands of such examples. This synthesis of meaning that a human artist accomplishes in such works does not follow any general criteria, but is highly idiosyncratic. The decision that these 5 elements form a context of meaning that might be relevant to another person or to society is based on the unique self-organization of the human brain. And here, early childhood imprints, conversations, unhappy loves, books, mental disorders, and all sorts of things can play a role. An AI that could create works like The Ninth Hour would have to be an AI that can subjectify itself. Such AI subjectification cannot simply be equated with AI embodiment or AI consciousness, which is often cited as a prerequisite for the development of AGI. Rather, such subjectified AI would require self-consciousness and social interaction with other subjectified AIs. Actually, such a hypothetical AI subject would have to live a life like a human being. Here, the whole thought experiment gets into a circular argument. One is talking about an artificial intelligence which could only develop under the human condition. Let's summarize. The creativity space of art is a very broad field. There is the creativity of infinite variation, of which AI art algorithms such as Icon are already capable today. There is concept-based creativity in art, which would require a general artificial intelligence with common sense knowledge. And there is the creativity of the uncommon sense, in relation to which the notion artificial intelligence must be humanized, and the word artificial loses all its meaning. So my conclusion and hypothesis would be that AI art can unfold under the exhausted paradigm of material aesthetics. However, the idea that AI art could also create full-blown Gehalt-aesthetic artwork seems to be a fallacy. For the humanities, however, this fallacy would be great news. Thank you very much.